Hi folks, welcome to the first video in this tutorial series for the Vulcan. This series will be split into 4 parts, with each part covering a different portion of the flight. The first part will be covering the procedures required to apply power to the aircraft and to prepare it for engine start. The flight we will be completing in the series is Doncaster Sheffield to RAF Fairford. This is the same route that is used in the tutorial flight in the Vulcan operations manual, so feel free to pull that up if you'd like to follow along with us there too. We start our flight today parked at Doncaster Sheffield, formerly known as RAF Finningley. The aircraft is in a cold and dark state, with engines shut down, electrical power off, and chocks and engine covers fitted. Moving into the cockpit, we can begin our pre-flight checks by switching on the oxygen supply on both side consoles and confirming that the mechanical indicators blink on and off as we breathe. We now need to move into the airborne electrical operator's position in the rear cockpit. We can do this via several methods. The first method is via the controls at the bottom of the aircraft page on the AFB. Clicking the AEO button will take us to that position in the rear cockpit. Once in the new position, we can click the bezel of the AFB to bring it back into view, and then click one of the pilot positions to take us back to the forward cockpit. Alternatively, we have a couple of hidden click spots on the screws at the top of the main instrument panel. Clicking on one of these screws will take us to the panel in the rear cockpit, and clicking on the screw at the bottom of the panel whilst in the rear cockpit will either take us to the other panel in the rear cockpit or back to the forward cockpit. A few other ways that we can access these panels is via the in-game checklist system. We can click the eye icon to the right of an item that's in the rear cockpit, and that will take us directly to the item, or you can use the Microsoft Flight Simulator camera system to move between these panels. Once we are in the AEO's position, we can ensure that all switches and controls are in the off position before then switching on the battery. With the battery on, we can confirm a minimum of 24 volts is indicated on the voltmeter. Moving across to the alternator control panel, we can open the non-essential supplies switch guard and move the switch to trip. With the non-essential supplies tripped, we can confirm that the 2 non-essential mechanical indicators show discontinuity, which is a parallel line, before moving the non-essential supply switch to the reset position and closing the guard. With the non-essential supplies reset, the 2 mechanical indicators should return to their normal in-line position. The battery only has a limited amount of charge in the aircraft, so it's important that we get some external power connected as soon as possible. To connect the ground equipment, we can bring the AFB into view by clicking the bezel, and then clicking on the ground power and pollute options on the aircraft page to fit this external equipment. After waiting for a short period for the ground power and pollute to power up, we should notice a rise on the voltmeter up to 28 volts, indicating that the ground power has been connected and is powering the aircraft. We can now prepare the airborne auxiliary power plant panel for the AAPP start later in this tutorial. Set the LP cock to open, test the fire warning. Note that the Vulcan does not have a fire bell, so we're only looking for the fire light to illuminate here. Set the oxygen relight switches to off, and ensure the fuel mechanical indicator is displaying high, indicating that there is sufficient fuel to start the AAPP. Whilst we still have the AFB open, now is a good time to remove the engine covers using the covers option on the aircraft page. Moving back to the front cockpit and to the left side console, we can confirm that all powered flying controls are set to off with all lights illuminated. ensure that the yaw damper switch is set to off. We can then check that all the pitch damper controls are pulled up and all amber lights are illuminated. We can then do the same with the Mach tremor controls and ensure that the blue light is extinguished and the amber lights are illuminated. We can then check the 3 artificial field controls on the right side of the panel are all pulled up and that the 3 amber lights are illuminated. Moving down to the bottom of the panel, press all 10 primary flying control buttons and confirm that all 10 amber lights are illuminated. With all lights illuminated on this panel, this indicates that the primary flying controls are currently offline and cannot be moved. At the top of the main instrument panel, we can confirm that both main warning lights are illuminated and that the 3 reminder mechanical indicators are all shown white. Moving down to the throttle quadrant, we can check that the air brake switch is in the fully up position and confirm that the air brake mechanical indicator is shown black. This confirms that the air brakes are in the down and locked position. On the co-pilot's main instrument panel, we can set the de-ice switch to low, before then testing the windscreen overheat amber light and checking that the 3 windscreen overheat mechanical indicators at the far aft side of the right console all show normal. Continuing on the right side console, we can ensure the AAPP bleed switch is set to shut and that the adjacent mechanical indicator is also indicating shut. At the very aft side of the right side console, we can ensure that the AVS master switch, which is labelled vent suit in this aircraft, is in the closed position. With this switch in the open position, this would direct air into the flight suits to provide air conditioning to the flight crew. The aircraft is now ready to be supplied by 200 volt power, so we can either do that in one of 2 ways, either via a ground power unit, which we have done, or via the AAPP. For this tutorial, although the ground power is already connected, we will also run through the AAPP method just to take you through the process. So returning to the AAO position in the rear cockpit, we can set the AAPP master switch to on, before then moving the slider and pressing the AAPP start button. As the AAPP starts, we can monitor the GPT and oil pressure readings. And once the readings stabilise, we can press the AAPP on button to connect the AAPP alternator to the synchronising busbar. With an alternator connected to the synchronising busbar, we can then switch on both 115 volt transformers and confirm that the 2 mechanical indicators are shown in line. The aircraft is now being supplied with 200 volts both by the AAPP and the ground power unit. Returning to the front cockpit and to the left side console, we can turn on the VHF and UHF radios by moving the mode selector switch to the TR+G position. A nice little feature that we added here from our Hawk in Microsoft Flight Simulator is the ability to save custom frequencies on the frequency card. To do this, we can rotate the channel knob to the M manual position, then select a custom frequency using the dials at the top of the panel, and with that frequency set, we simply click on one of the preset frequencies on the frequency card at the bottom of the panel to overwrite that frequency. Continuing on the left side console, ensure the normal bomb door control switch is in the auto position and that the bomb bay doors position corresponds with the bomb doors mechanical indicator on the main instrument panel. Moving up to the main instrument panel, we can then set the first pilot's altimeter to the reset position and confirm the standby flag clears. On the underside of the Coleman, above the main instruments, we can open the 4 LP fuel cock switch guards and move the switches to the open forward position. Moving down the panel, we can reset the accelerometer by pressing the push to set button. We can confirm that the landing gear is selected down and that the 3 green lights are shown on the position indicator. As a backup, in case of a bulb failure, we have 2 sets of bulbs that can be used to indicate the position of the gear, and we also have a day and night option which dims or brightens the lights. We can confirm that the parking brake is set to on, with the hydraulic pressure indicator indicating that 2 pressures are on the green band range. If the pressures are not in the green band range, we can select the EHPP switch to start to increase the pressures, and then return the switch back to the central position once the pressures are in the green band range. On the left side of the throttle quadrant, we can ensure the takeoff cruise selector is in the takeoff position with the guard closed, and that the JPT limiter switch is in the on position, also with the guard closed. On the right side of the throttle quadrant, ensure the emergency air undercarriage lever is fully in. If you do happen to pull this lever out, this will dump all of the air stored in the landing gear cylinders, and the gear will not be able to be retracted. We have, however, added an option to the EFB, so that if you do pull this lever inadvertently, you can reset that system and retract the landing gear. We can ensure the HRS MFS switch is set to the MFS position, and no, MFS doesn't stand for Microsoft Flight Simulator, it means Military Flight System. On the fuel quantity gauges, we can just check that we have enough fuel for the flight. For this tutorial flight, we will be taking off with the default weight that the aircraft loads in with. So we have approximately 75,000 pounds of fuel, which is more than enough for our short flight today. Moving down to the fuel console, we can click on the handle to extend the console. On the fuel panel, we can perform checks of each individual fuel pump by switching one pump on at a time and confirming one of the fuel pressure mechanical indicators turns black. We can then test the crossfeed by setting one fuel pump to on and then opening all 3 crossfeed cocks and confirming that all fuel pressure mechanical indicators show black, indicating that all engines have sufficient fuel pressure. We can then close the crossfeed cocks again and turn the fuel pumps off and confirm that the 4 mechanical indicators return to showing white. Whilst we're on the fuel panel, we might as well turn on all the fuel pumps now in preparation for engine start. We don't have any fuel tanks fitted to the bomb bay for this flight, so we can leave all the switches in the bomb bay fuel panel to off. We can now prepare the autopilot for flight. To do so, we can confirm that the 3 channel switches at the top of the panel, R for rudder, A for aileron, and E for elevator, are all in the in position, and then we can pull the power switch up. After a short delay allowing for the autopilot gyro to spin up, the ready mechanical indicator will show white, and that indicates that the autopilot is powered and ready for use. There may be a time when you're flying the Vulcan where the power knob will not hold in the up position and the ready mechanical indicator won't show white, it'll just show black permanently. If that occurs, that likely means that the autopilot has been disengaged via non-normal means, usually either being forced off via force on the control column or by the instinctive cutout switches on the rear of the control columns. If the autopilot is disconnected one of those ways, the 28 volt supply to the autopilot will immediately be cut off, and the only way you can reset that supply is via the autopilot reset switch on the right side console. Toggling this switch on and off will reset the autopilot's power supply, and you'll then be able to pull up the power knob and the ready mechanical indicator will turn white after a short period of time. On the co-pilot's instrument panel, we can set the MFS TFR switch to MFS and check that the bomb bay and wing fuselage fire warning lights are extinguished. If we want to do some low level flying, we would move this MFS TFR switch to the TFR position, which stands for Terrain Following Radar, and the flight directors will give us guidance to maintain an altitude at low level. Moving down to the right side console, we can set the throttle detent isolation switch to out. The throttle detent is a system that features only on aircraft fitted with the Olympus 301 engines, and it causes the inboard engines to have a slightly higher flight idle RPM at higher altitudes compared to the outboard engines. This won't matter for our flight today as we are flying at a relatively low altitude, but as we are in an aircraft that is fitted with Olympus 200 series engines, we should set this to out just for accuracy. We can then set the pressure selector to cruise and rotate the guard. We can ensure that all engine and cabin air switches are set to shut. The ram air valve is shut. The temperature selector is cooled, and the cooled air turbine mechanical indicator is black. On the lighting control section of the right side console, set the external light master switch to on and set the nav light to flash. A quick switch to the external camera shows the beacon lights rotating away at the bottom and on top of the aircraft. And that just about wraps up part 1 of this tutorial series, as we have the aircraft in a state ready to start the engines. So with that, we kindly ask you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share the video with your friends if you found it useful. In part 2, we will be covering engine starting.